Darcy Alexandra Darcy est notre, she is our Associate Dean for Research at the Faculty of Humanities at the University of Victoria. She is a very dear colleague, and she is a linguist, a very bright one, working on what is allowed, what is censored, and the purists and the Nazis of languages, as she calls them. So, Alexandra, the floor is yours.
It's great to see you. Bonjour tout le monde. Buongiorno. Hello. It's really an honor to join you this morning, or perhaps this evening, depending on where you are, to introduce Dr. Marina Battaglio, who's Associate Professor in the Department of Hispanic and Italian Studies here at the University of Victoria. Dr. Battaglio's research strengths are in the intersections of gender and media studies, with a particular focus on the discursive construction of maternal figures in contemporary Spain and Italy, exploring how images of motherhood constitute powerful ideological tools that have shaped women's identity throughout history. Her research examines the ways in which maternal narratives respond to patriarchal notions of maternal conduct and to neoliberal self-branding in post-Franco Spain and in Italy. So her current project, supported by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, concentrates on maternal self-expression in Spanish graphic novels and political cartoons, asking how women writer-illustrators assess the mechanisms of male domination and how they respond to neoliberal influences that commercialize and commodify mothering. So her presentation today, very cleverly titled "A Womb with a Political View, Reclaiming Reproductive Rights in Spanish Graphic Narratives," zeroes in on the ways in which graphic artists mobilized against an attempted restrictive abortion law in 2014, drawing on the image of the womb to defend women's rights. So this will be a powerful and provocative presentation. I'm sure it'll be followed by some really, really interesting and moving and engaged conversation. So enjoy as I turn the Zoom room over to Dr. Battaglio.
Thank you so much, Alex, and thank you so much, Hélène. Hélène and Alex have the great gift of making people look much better than they are. So I hope to live up to the presentations and the expectations. And as you can hear, I have a foreign accent. I'm an Italian studying Spanish and Italian feminism. And I'm really grateful to my colleagues. I have to say that this presentation wouldn't have been possible without Alex's support when I was writing the Shirk grant. So it's really so nice to be surrounded by people who have meant so much in my intellectual life. So I would like to share my PowerPoint if it's possible. Do I have permission to?
Yes, you have permission. You have permission. Okay, just
sure.
share. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks. With sometimes we are not. There's always a bit of anxiety surrounding the technology. So I'm sure everybody has recognized the allusion to Ian Foster, A Room with a View, and here we have a womb with a political view. My presentation is divided in roughly 3 parts. A bit of a theoretical introduction and social historical context before we move to examine the vignette that were mobilized against the attempt to reverse the abortion law in Spain in 2013. It is interesting to note, as many political theorists have done, that in times in which even in liberal democracies, we see a supposed threat to a sense of national identity that comes with influx of immigration, what we see is this twofold kind of discursive strategy. So the intensification of hostility towards immigrants and refugees that go hand in hand with attempts to restrict women's reproductive self-determination. There are two theories in particular that deal with this political issue. Rosalind DeProse and Eva Ziarek, who in their recent book on Hannah Arendt, Natality and Politics, talk about this paradoxical way in which there is increased xenophobia and at the same time increased control over women's reproductive right, which is something that we see not only in Spain, but I'm sure in France, and we've seen in Italy playing out quite explicitly. The same phenomenon plays out perhaps in even stronger terms in Latin America, and the Argentinian anthropologist Rita Segato has been very explicit about this phenomenon, and she goes on to actually call it la guerra contra las mujeres, no, like kind of war against women. As we see more and more of a conservative turn in terms of politics that results in this very dangerous marriage of capital and repression over women's reproduction. And Rita Segato identifies a sort of a Christian family-centered moralism that emerges in so many of the popular discourses on reproduction. What happens in Spain is particularly interesting because we cannot forget the totalitarian past of Spain. I'm sure everybody in France remembers what happened in 2011 with the 15M movement, no, el 15M, the Indignados that took the streets, and the very name of Indignados comes from the French manifesto by Stéphane Hessel, Indignez-vous. In Spain, people certainly had a lot of reason to be indignados because of the impact of the fall of Lehman Brothers and what in Spain played out as the explosion of this real estate bubble that had driven Spanish economy for so many years. So there was this growth that had taken place in Spain thanks to the construction business. And when the economic crisis strikes, the effect on the entire economic system is particularly strong. And people see an increase in precarization in terms of working conditions, rising unemployment, a political class that is unable to face the crisis and unable to provide responses. And so people take to the streets. It's very interesting to see the way it's a time in which Spain kind of goes back to this foundational time, which is 1975, when Franco finally dies and the transition to democracy takes place, and a political system is put in place. So it is this system that is rooted in the transition, what people who took the street, the indignados, want to change. No? So, and it's very interesting also the fact that at the time of the transition period is a time with a lot of graphic artists who are really driving the changes that took place in Spain. In a similar level, we see a lot of graphic artists that mobilize creativity in order to support what was called the Spanish Revolution. So humor is part of a critique of the economic system and a critique of a kind of political system in which economy is what drives social policies. So we have slogans such as el problema es el sistema, the problem is the system, los recortes matan, like budget cuts are killing. And also within this kind of Spanish Revolution, which I would say is pretty much androcentric, but that is open to debate, some feminist slogans, some feminist ideas begin to trickle down. And so we see that the kind of books that get published to, in a sense, support this Indignados movement. I brought here just 3 of them. They are all, some of them are collective works, some of them have been written individually. Even in the collective work, mostly we see the male perspective. Nonetheless, there's also a part of feminism that is active during the acampada, during the sit-in, especially in Madrid, in the Plaza del Sol, Puerta del Sol. And this banner appeared, La revolución será feminista o no será. Revolution will be feminist or there will be no revolution. And it's noteworthy that when this banner was put up, a couple of people decided to tear it down, saying that this movement had nothing to do with feminism. The feminism really was not an issue. And while there was a really difficult relationship between feminism and the Indignados, nonetheless, the seeds that were planted during these acampadas, during these sit-ins that lasted for many weeks, actually were the germs of further revolution, were the germs of a renewal of feminisms and feminisms in the plural. Meanwhile, as I was saying, people look back to the transition period as a period that needs to be rethought and reconceptualized. So looking back and reflecting. And this reflection from a feminist point of view is a reflection on how much women had to fight for their reproductive rights, the right to contraception. For young people who might not have been familiar with the situation of women in Spain, in 1975 in Spain, it was illegal to buy birth control in a pharmacy. So going from there to achieving an abortion law and also achieving some kind of sex ed was something that feminists had to fight for really, really intensively. So I think it's important to remember how graphic artists, especially people like Nuria Pompeya, fought to achieve much needed rights that were, for instance, available in France, but not in Spain. It's interesting to note that there is like a swing of the pendulum in the way misogyny plays out, and also a glamorization of misogyny throughout the last 3 or 4 decades. And in Spain, it's interesting to note that with the strong decrease in birth rates from the mid-70s onward, there are some attempts to bring birth rates up, and they are played out according to different kinds of logic. For instance, in 1911 in Italy, there was this book that was quite famous by this journalist Costanza Miriano, Sposati e sii sottomessa, pratica estrema per donne senza paura. No, get married and be submissive, which was translated into Spanish in 2013, thanks to the effort of the bishops of Granada. So it has the backing of the Catholic Church. For people, I know a couple of people who are from Italy, Valletta is not exactly the most conservative it could have been published by the Paulina editions, which is the religious publishers, but no, it wasn't backed up by the Catholic Church as much as it was in Spain. And I brought here a couple of covers to see how in different contexts, graphic designers decided to play on different messages. And we see the French one and the English one play with the post-feminist imageries about how to be a modern / traditional woman. So at the same time, the Catholic Church was very active in trying to promote anti-abortion campaigns. For instance, there was this one that was extremely controversial. I mean, Costanza Miriano's book was extremely controversial among Spanish feminists. This anti-abortion campaign that says, and what about me, protect my life, because it compares children with this lince iberico, the Iberian lynx, which is an endangered species. And to this day, we see campaigns that are supported by the Catholic Church, like a Rosario por la Vida, like a Rosary for Life. Meanwhile, in 2011, a lot of youth took to the streets, especially this group called Juventud sin Futuro, Youth Without a Future, that point out that they are a generation without a job, without a house, without a pension, but without fear. So this is, I think, worth keeping in mind, because how can you want a generation that has no certainty? How can you ask them to actually have children? Nonetheless, in 2011, there is this kind of social schizophrenia that takes place in Spain, because on the one hand, there is the Indignados movement, but on the same, in the same year, the conservative Partido Popular, the People's Party, actually wins the election in November. And 2 years later, less than 2 years later, they bring a new abortion bill, which is significantly titled as Bill of Organic Law for the Protection of the Life of the Conceived and the Rights of the Pregnant Woman. No? So here again, we see the state that has this imperialistic and patriarchal attitude towards women, which is what women in Spain had been fought against for such a long time. For me, it's also interesting because these attempts to lure women back to the role of the mother and the housewife is something that, for instance, in France, several theorists had been exposing. For instance, Elisabeth Badinter in Le Conflit, La Femme et la Mère, talks about these naturalistic discourses that want to bring women back to a domestic role. On the perhaps a different ideological spectrum, we have people like Virginie Despentes, which I know is a kind of controversial figure with her King Kong theory, in which she says, well, you know, we have this propaganda that having children is the best that can happen to you, but you have to do it among social conditions in which there's no stability. You have no stable job, you have no house. So, but have children, and that will be the best that is going to happen to you. Against this kind of propaganda, Spanish feminists come up with a lot of initiatives. One of them is called El Tren de la Libertad, the freedom train, that which is a series of trains that from all over Spain converge in Madrid in a big manifestation, in big demonstrations, saying, I'm going to decide. It's not going to be the state that decides for me. Women are going to decide on their own. And then there's a lot of not just the women, but also men who expose these paradoxes, the paradoxes surrounding reproduction in a country in which women are clearly discriminated against in the workplace. So there is this cartoon, which I think really summarizes this dichotomy, no? When it says, when I said I didn't want to have children, they shamed me. But when I said I was going to have a child, I was fired. And that is a reality that a lot of feminists have talked about, the fact that when with the kind of political changes and reforms of the protections of workers greatly diminished after 2009. And so for many women, having children is really, in a sense, dangerous, because there's no protection in terms of their employment history. The Association of Women Graphic Artists decided to mobilize artists against this new proposal. And so they created this platform called Woombastic, and they encouraged all artists to send their vignettes as a way to protest. And these were all images that then could be downloaded for free, and they could be shown during all sorts of, people could use them as a political weapon the way they wanted. And the title, the Woombastic, obviously refers to the womb, with this notion that tota mulier in uterus, but also I found there is a superhero little magazine, Bombastic, so there might be this intertextual relationship as well. What they do, they soon get kind of flooded with images, because so many graphic artists immediately decide to join this campaign. In terms of imageries, we see that Gallardón, who is the Minister of Justice who proposed this new abortion bill, frequently appears in their vignettes, in their images. Also, references to religion are abundant. Also, the notion that women will decide, so yo decido, it's quite prevalent. There are other references to religion, references to the French Revolution, and a great variety of artistic styles in the way they decide to fight against this new abortion law. For instance, I've chosen the ones that have more references to politics. For instance, this one by Susana Martin, who is a well-known graphic artist. She is the author of Alicia en un Mundo Real, which is a graphic novel about breast cancer. And she's also the co-author of a book about immigration. She has this image, mi útero no lo expropia ni Dios. And it is a reference to the extractionist policies that the government of Mariano Rajoy put in place. And these are policies whereby so many people ended up being homeless because this government that supposedly is so fond of protecting life had no problem leaving thousands of people homeless. The presence of Gallardón, as I was telling you, is quite explicit in so many of the cartoons. For instance, Yo decido, tú te callas, I decide and you will be quiet, you'll shut up. And also the fact that this abortion law is going to be a weapon against Gallardón, which is what eventually happened. Gallardón eventually resigned and disappeared from politics. So it was this weapon that could be mobilized against him. Again, lots of images that foreground the fact that women are not property of the state. And this is what women really want to drive home. People do not want to return to a situation similar of what women lived during Francoism, in which the state kept women in a subservient position for over 40 years. So there is this, por favor, señor Gallardón, haría el favor de salir de mi útero. So please, Mr. Gallardón, would you mind getting out of my uterus? And, you know, this is a woman who has this sign, propiedad del Estado, no, state property. And so women are really against these notions that the state will control them, will control their reproductive rights. This one is one of the most, in my opinion, one of the most interesting ones, because it also shows the political rifts within the same party. We see the guy with the beard is the prime minister, Mariano Rajoy. The other one is Gallardón. And Gallardón tells Rajoy, oh, darn, Mariano, they told me that a pregnant Moroccan woman jumped over the barrier of Melilla and didn't even got wounded with the barbed wires, with the blades. And Mariano doesn't dare to say it, but he says, he thinks, well, let's see how you react when you find out that she had a miscarriage, no? Tuvo un aborto, due to the beating that she received by the Guardia Civil, no? And I thought that this was interesting because it really arches back to this notion of xenophobia on the one hand and protection of the unborn, the conceived unborn child, which here is exposed in these kind of schizophrenic policies whereby Moroccans that try to enter Spain through Melilla. Ceuta and Melilla are two Spanish cities in Morocco. There's the entire story of Spain intervention in Morocco that often plays out in these political cartoons. And this one is also interesting because it's detalles de una mente incoherente, like a patchwork of an incongruent mind. So supposedly Gallardón is a staunch defender of life, but is it a life worth living? Is una vida digna? Because the Partido Popular is also the party that supports bullfight, so total disregard for animal rights. The pensions were affected by the series of reforms that the Partido Popular brought to bear on people. And sorry, I didn't want to change the slide. So elderly people, people with a disability, immigrants that try to climb over the fences in Ceuta and Melilla, what about their lives? So here it really exposes this dichotomy of, a supposed protection of life within a policy that has no regard for life. And then the effect of budget cuts on women's rights. For instance, this woman says, well, darling, if you see that we don't have enough money to turn on the heat, we can start the fire in the stove with this, the Declaration of the Rights of Women. Then this one is particularly interesting because Cristina Duran and Miguel Ginerbo are the author of Una posibilidad entre mil, in which they recount their story as parents of a child with a disability. And then, so they say, ¿a qué viene tanta preocupación por el no nacido si luego abandonan y desprecian al ya nacido? So how come you're so worried about the unborn if then you abandon and you look down upon the ones that are born? And she and the two of them, their husband and wife, they know full well how difficult it is to care for a child with a disability, with a profound disability, because their daughter suffered derrame cerebral, like a stroke, the day after she was born. So they had to deal with a system that provides no support for people who need extra help. I decided to put this cartoon as well, because I know that in France, there were graphic artists that also reflected on this kind of policy in Spain. And I think that this doesn't need any comments, no, going back to the knitting needles for abortion. And then finally, the abortion law was aborted. And again, here we see Gallardón as one of the images. The Bombastic campaign was very popular, so there were expositions in various parts of Spain. Lots of artists, for instance, Roto, exposed the perversion of the Catholic Church, for instance, saying, since you didn't believe in sins anymore, we will make those sins into crimes. And then I wanted to show you how, in spite of the fact that society, feminists and society in general, were able to stop that proposal, nonetheless, in parts of Spain, you can see how the right wing is still very much trying to oppose abortion. And I wanted to conclude with this image from the collective Matsutake, which is I think based in Bologna, that came up with this image that I think that sums up what I was saying in the beginning with regard to this marriage of racism, xenophobia, and supposed protection of women's reproductive right. And here it says, basta genocidi silenziosi, stop abortion, no? So these are men who have totally colonized women's wombs. So I wanted to conclude here. I hope I didn't go over time too much. And now we can, I didn't follow the script because I thought it was easier to talk, and then we can have a conversation if it's not too late. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Marina, and thank you to both of our interpreters. Merci à nos interprètes bien-aimés. Je repasse la parole à Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation, and I'm pretty sure there are a couple of questions.
Sorry.
Question in French, in English. I will be happy to translate in Italian too, so feel free to ask.
Nous sommes maintenant dans ce moment d'image produite maintenant et que les questions pour David Gifford et pour sa présentation sur les proportions et la difficulté de représenter des femmes qui sont debout, qui sont en mouvement, ces questions sont aussi les bienvenues. David, I said that questions regarding your talk would be welcome as well.
Patricia Caraffi a une question, je crois. J'ai vu une main. Non, je ne la vois plus. Patricia Caraffi.
Patricia?
Oui.
Yeah.
Oui, je suis là et je n'avais pas... Mais d'abord, Marina, ciao. C'est grâce à Marina que j'ai rencontré, j'ai connu Hélène. Excuse-moi si je parle français, mais mon anglais est effrayant, disons. Donc, merci pour ta communication si lucide et politiquement très importante, puisque cette situation espagnole, tu as donné un cadre vraiment d'un point de vue sociologique, politique, historique, très, très complet. Tu sais que je partage parfaitement nos idées. Je trouve que la représentation graphique pour revenir un petit peu au thème du colloque est aussi importante que celle, disons, de l'engagement politique à travers les manifestations, les livres, les articles, etc. C'est pas vraiment une question, hein. C'est pas vraiment ça. C'est que je vois qu'il y a vraiment une vague noire derrière laquelle il y a la partie, la pégeure de l'Église, des religions quand elles sont extrémistes. Et en fait, elle cache les régimes ou l'envie de régime. L'envie, disons. On est en démocratie, mais tout le monde a vu la résurgence des mouvements nazis, etc. Mais je ne veux pas, je répète, trop m'éloigner du thème principal. Je trouve que la lutte des femmes est encore une fois vraiment un signe de démocratie. Les droits des femmes. Je viens d'un colloque sur la violence, effrayant. Et il y a 2 jours, on a découvert un corps d'une jeune femme qui a été tuée parce qu'elle a refusé de se marier avec quelqu'un qui avait été décidé par ses parents. Le 1er mai, en plein centre Bologne démocratique, Bologne a été tuée, une jeune femme a été mutilée, démorcelée, démembrée. Voilà, donc c'est vraiment, on est en état d'émergence, pas seulement sanitaire. Voilà, je m'étais. Merci. Grazie Marina.
Grazie.
Et merci.
I think that in Spain and in Italy, we are particularly aware of this kind of war on women that is playing out in such tragic terms. And there's also something I didn't really go into, the relationship between the violence on women with this kind of state violence that also plays out in terms of the way women are often kicked out of the job market. That is another form of violence against women, which is particularly strong in Spain and in Italy. You know, we share this kind of history of misogyny that keeps playing out.
Tout à fait. Ouais.
Tatiana Clavier, je crois que vous aviez levé la main.
Oui, alors au risque d'être un petit peu décalé, d'abord merci beaucoup pour cette conférence. En fait, une idée me trottait dans la tête en vous écoutant, c'est qu'on s'intéresse, ça va vous paraître peut-être un peu curieux, mais on s'intéresse finalement à la grossesse, soit pour interdire son interruption volontaire, soit uniquement, et c'est là que ça va vous paraître curieux, en fonction de l'enfant à naître. Mais le corps des femmes enceintes, c'est-à-dire la visibilité de l'intimité d'une femme enceinte, que l'enfant arrive ou pas. Il me semble que la recherche est en passe seulement de s'emparer de ce sujet. Et la lutte des femmes est en train de s'emparer de ce sujet très récemment. Je voudrais partager avec vous une découverte, un ouvrage qui a été publié il y a quelques semaines seulement, qui s'intitule « 3 mois sous silence ». De Judith Akienne et dont le sous-titre est « Le tabou de la condition des femmes en début de grossesse » et qui s'intéresse à ces 3 premiers mois de grossesse dont on ne parle pas. Et ça m'a vraiment ouvert. J'ai lu juste la préface parce que je l'ai commandée mais je ne l'ai pas reçue. La préface est disponible sur Google Book. Et cette préface m'a vraiment éclairée parce qu'il me semble que c'est la première fois qu'on parle de la grossesse, que l'enfant arrive ou pas. Parce que finalement, il arrive très bien, à partir du 3e mois, on a le droit d'en parler. Il n'arrive pas, on fait une fausse couche à 3 mois, du coup, ce traumatisme-là, on ne peut pas en parler. Et voilà, et je pensais, tout au long de vos paroles, de votre conférence, à ce tabou de la grossesse, c'est-à-dire du corps des femmes, du sexe, de leur utérus, de leur intimité, voilà, des femmes enceintes, ces 3 premiers mois. Alors, je ne sais pas si ça vous parle ou si c'est complètement décalé, mais voilà, cet ouvrage, je pense, va marquer vraiment un pas parce que enfin, la lutte des femmes et la recherche féministe s'emparent de ce qui, il me semble, je ne sais pas, hein, vous êtes plus spécialiste que moi, il me semble que ça n'avait pas encore été discuté. Qu'en pensez-vous?
Thank you so much for your question, no? Because if my command of French is a little shaky, but I think that what you are talking about is how there is a new sort of paradigm in the way the woman's body is shown, including elements that would have been kind of considered obscene, right? This reappropriation of women's anatomy in ways that defies the kind of androcentric gaze, which sees the woman as an object of pleasure, right? Did I understand correctly?
Mais qui voit la femme enceinte comme la future mère et qui ne s'intéresse finalement qu'à l'enfant à venir et pas à la femme dans ce qu'elle vit de ces 3 premiers mois qui sont souvent les plus difficiles à vivre et qui restent tabous.
Oui, thank you for pointing this out because this is actually most of my research has to do with the mother and recovering the voices of the mother, because there is all this laudatory discourse that talks about how the most wonderful thing it is to be a mother, And then there is this dark side that a number of graphic artists are actually bringing to the fore. And actually my research, most of my research goes into the direction of looking at how actually women, when they are mothers, they express the ambiguity and how there is no political support. And for me, what is very interesting also is the fact that a lot of the books that are published, that's where the neoliberal discourse or choice comes in. It's like, if you chose to become a mother, you have to enjoy it because you made it. It's your own like self-making enterprise, neoliberal self-enterprise. And I read a couple of French graphic novels. There is one that is, I think it's called Mère Anonyme, which plays with the Alcoholic Anonymous. And it begins with this group of women that are like the Alcoholic Anonymous, who are the unhappy mothers. And there's their like big vice that they share. But it's very interesting how I think the market and what is allowed to come out, it is very possible to be very vocal against abortion, but there's still a taboo about talking about how unhappy mothers are, because there is where a change of paradigm would be necessary to change this fact that motherhood is such a private thing. And the state, especially in Spain and in Italy, is totally withdrawn. Like there's all this pro-life, but then I think compared to France, Spain looks actually at France as a place in which women have so many more rights. But I know that even for women in France, having children is not an easy thing. So I'm not sure whether I'm actually addressing, but if you could write the title of the book that you mentioned in the chat, that would be great. So
I would like to say, no, please. I would like to say, please wait. There is interpretation, and some of you may be there for the first time. Certains sont peut-être ici pour la première fois. You have a globe, and you have to choose your language. So Marina, everything you say is interpreted, and you can hear the interpretation of your questions too. So, and I see that some people cannot understand the questions, but they have to choose the language and navigate the language. Okay, so that wasn't a question, that was to help the questions to be understood by everyone. Tatiana, je te laisse la parole. And before that, I say a huge thanks to our interpreters.
I think we have...
Vas-y, Tatiana. Non, j'ai coupé Tatiana.
Non, mais j'en ai assez dit. Je vais mettre dans le chat le titre de cet ouvrage. Mais pour rebondir sur ce qui vient d'être dit, c'est vraiment la question de la femme non productive, justement, qui tombe enceinte et dont la grossesse ne va pas jusqu'au bout. C'est de ça, à mon avis, dont il faudrait s'emparer. Et il me semble que l'ouvrage dont je parle, qui vient d'être publié, s'en empare pour la première fois. Et je pense que c'est essentiel. Voilà. Pour la visibilité du corps des femmes. Que la grossesse aille au bout ou pas, qu'elle soit mère ou pas. Parce que quand elles sont enceintes, même quelques mois, il y a quelque chose de l'ordre de la maternité qui déjà apparaît, qui ne se concrétise peut-être pas. Voilà, j'arrête là. Je pense que vous avez compris, pour ceux qui ont eu la traduction. Je suis désolée, mon niveau d'anglais est catastrophique.
Non.
Le mien.
Mais, je crois qu'il y avait Joseph Grossi. did you raise your hand? And then Patricia Carazzi.
Après.
Thank you very much. And tantissime grazie Marina di una conferenza squisita. Grazie a Hélène e tutte le altre organizzatrici e organizzatori di questo congresso, questa conferenza. Marina, I had a question about the book by Costanza Miriano that you mentioned, because you pointed out that the reaction and the support of the Catholic Church in Italy differed somewhat from the kind of support that the Spanish Church gave to this book. Can you maybe tell us a little bit more about that? Because that was, I mean, among the many interesting points that you raised in your talk. I was kind of thinking about that one in particular, about like the degrees of resistance from the church and what that difference might look like.
Yes, well, because in Italy it was published, in Spain, it was translated thanks to the support of the bishops.
Right.
So the Catholic Church had a role in having the book translated and published. In Italy, they didn't have to do anything. It's actually interesting because it's Costanza Miriano was working for not exactly a Catholic media, but her message was able to catch the attention of so many women, and there's been several editions of the same book, and there's actually a sequel for men. Marry her and make her happy, something like that. But you know, the notion that, you know, well, what will make you happy will be to have children. There's also this notion that Zygmunt Bauman presents in his last posthumous book, Retrotopia, which is like a utopia for the past. And this really plays out a lot with regard to motherhood, with regard to having children, this archaic past that has never existed, in which women were completely fulfilled by motherhood. And, you know, this plays out in not just conservative discourses, but even like the left-wing, supposedly natural discourse, no? Women who, you know, are really in favor of breastfeeding and natural cloth diapers. There is a sense of an Arcadia where being a mother was wonderful, and we just have to recover that Arcadia. And it's an Arcadia that never existed. If we think about the percentage of women who died in childbirth, there was no Arcadia, there was no happy, you know, but there is this, I think this notion of retrotopia is very powerful, because this arching back to an invented happy past where also men were men and women were women, whatever that meant, of a happy family where so all these discourses play out, and the Catholic Church is obviously very happy to support them or to spread them. Thank you so much, Tatiana, for the title of your book. And I want to say that yes, what you're talking about is very, very interesting. The silence surrounding the pregnancies that do not result in childbirth. There's actually a graphic novel about that came out in the US. And this is something that a number of contemporary, especially Latin American writers, are writing about.
I know that some people have to leave, and I want to thank you, Marina, for the womb with a view. I'm struck by the fact that this has been quite different than the perspective we have had, but it connects very nicely to our previous talks and presentations, particularly to the first and second days when we were discussing the representation of the nothingness of the uterus, of the emptiness of the female body, and that it had to be filled by conception and by pregnancy, and then it would excrete others or babies. And I'm struck by that. I also want to emphasize that the use of color is something that we have discussed also. And I was really amazed at seeing these pink and purple uteruses that come from the tradition we have seen in the 16th and 17th century. I also want to invite you to visit the blog for the conference, where there are many resources, and many of these resources actually pertain to our questions. Next Wednesday, so 2 days from now, that will be our last structured meeting. That's our last island. And it will be in English for the first session. And I'm extremely grateful to Kim Daly, Lenora Mercilus, Joan Humphreys, and Sujin Lee, because they will continue actually the reflection of today and of our previous sessions before the performance and presentation by the Montreal artist, Caroline Boileau, who has created a work for this conference. And I'm extremely grateful to Caroline. You can see the first drawing on the blog. I'm sorry it was so long, but I had to say it before everyone leaves, and we can resume our debates afterwards with the questions from Patricia and others. But I wanted to say that before we are getting dispersed. The last thing, please someone volunteer to chair in English or in French. I can translate too, but to chair the session with Kim, Lenora, Sujin, and Joan. It's about reproductive rights, about medical practices right now. And I think that it will be a wonderful last roundtable. So contact me either by the chat or by email. Now I'll say not another word, and I leave the floor to Sarah, our beloved chair, thanking again Marina, David, and in absentia, Jérémy and Isolde.
Qu'il y avait, je ne la vois plus, Patricia Caraffi qui avait levé la main, mais je l'ai perdue.
Oui.
Ah, vous êtes là, Patricia, vous vouliez poser une question?
Je vais être très rapide puisque les temps courent. Je vais me faire tout de suite. Seulement, en écoutant ce truc de 3 mois, je pensais au fait que la loi sur l'avortement permet, la loi italienne permet l'avortement jusqu'à la 2e semaine, c'est-à-dire les 3e mois. Et l'autre chose, c'est que je suis parfaitement d'accord avec Hélène qui écrivait en chat, c'est aussi une traduction visuelle, savante et conceptuelle. C'est vrai, c'est ça, c'est tout à fait ça, c'est ancien, archaïque, et c'est toujours la même histoire, c'est-à-dire on n'a pas le droit de décider. Et le corps maternel n'est pas un corps qui produit. Et donc, les droits français sont très différents. Disons, les protections sociales françaises et celles italiennes et celles espagnoles sont très, très différentes à ces propos. je vais me taire. C'est tout. Je préfère qu'il y ait une discussion pour que les autres aussi interviennent. Voilà. Parce que autrement, on remonterait au Moyen-Âge, donc là, il y a plein de choses à dire, mais ce n'est pas le cas en ce moment, et on n'a pas le temps. Voilà. Donc, je laisse volontiers, très volontiers la parole aux collègues. Et merci Marina, merci à tout le monde aujourd'hui.
Olga?
Olga Albarrán.
Hi,
Sí,
hi.
Olga.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Yeah, okay. Thank you, Marina. I really enjoyed your presentation. It's always a pleasure to hear you and all these different graphic artists that had really a boom with a view, very interesting views of them. And I was interested also about the fact how these artists are now responding to the new challenges, because this was against the law of Gallardón, as we saw. And we are facing now like a backlash again in Spain, but in many other countries, no? And recently there is a crisis. I don't know if you're aware of the rest of the people. I can say a little bit. There is a lot of immigrants who are child with an adult company that are arriving to Spain. And in the other side, there is this it's not only in the right wing, but also a very conservative left that is saying that we need more kids, that we need to protect more reproductive rights so women can choose to have children because we don't have enough children. So it's a contradiction because we do have children, but not true Spaniards, right? So it's really a very racist issue, no? They don't want children who come from Africa to Spain, but they want Spaniard to I don't know what they called, but real Spaniard kids, I think is what they have been calling, no? So I was wondering how these artists, no, if they are organizing something now about this issue, because I think it's really problematic what we are seeing, no, not only from the right wing, but it is problematic is also it is this woman, Iris Simon, that the other day made huge discourse that was in the Moncloa, in the palace of the president, to address the issue that we need a new view of the family, and she's from the left, no? So it's a very conservative view. And I don't know what is going on in the graphic novel right now in Spain, in these artists, if they are doing something.
Hey, thank you, Olga. We still haven't seen something coming out because the Association of Women Graphic Artists mobilized against this proposal. But there is nothing that is mobilizing women to actually address this issue. Like you were talking about the MENAs, no, menores extranjeros no acompañados, like the foreign strangers who are unaccompanied. These are the immigrant children who in many cases lost their entire families when arriving in Spain, and the way they are treated is atrocious. But we do not see the same kind of outcry about them. And also I was hoping to see more graphic artists also talking about the crisis that the pandemic has and the impact of the pandemic. I think that what happens is that for so many women, the pandemic has been so extremely devastating that having the time to actually, as artists, to be able to be creative and address this is just, the situation has been so exhausting that I think that there is a real impact in terms of visibility of messages. And meanwhile, this a resurgence of ideas that we wouldn't have absolutely permitted to become so popular, like, oh, you know, you have to go back to the countryside and have children. Oof. So I think that we are in a moment of transformation. Who knows? Hopefully, we'll see graphic artists, men, women, and trans addressing these issues. Unfortunately, I fear that this pandemic crisis is really affecting especially women's ability to have the time, because in the end it's a matter of time, you know. So yeah, I think that you need a strong enemy in order to mobilize creativity, and these are kind of soft enemies, very insidious because they are so soft. And I use soft in inverted commas. But hopefully in 1 or 2 years, we'll see an explosion of creativity and protests against this kind of racism. But I think that at the moment it's hard for people to really mobilize.
We hope so. Is there any question, remarks, thoughts?
Can I ask a question whether in France there have been kind of more activists like supporting the right of immigrant children?
Well, I think that in France it would be illegal not to take care of a minor. So the way they are treated is not always exemplary. Ah, mais je vais parler en français puisque notre merveilleux traducteur est ici. Merci encore Emmanuel et Ginette. Donc la façon dont ces mineurs sont pris en charge est extrêmement problématique, puisqu'en fait on est enfermé quand on est pris en charge, hein. Mais l'État français a une telle conception du rôle de l'État qu'il serait impensable de ne pas élever comme pupille de l'État un mineur qui est sur le territoire. C'est d'ailleurs, dans la loi française, c'est un aspect de la loi sur l'immigration qui fait hurler la droite, mais une fois qu'un enfant est en France, même s'il est clandestin, il va à l'école en France et à ce titre peut y rester. Donc il y a eu sous la présidence de François Hollande, il y avait eu un grand scandale parce que une jeune fille qui avait 13 ans et qui arrivait en fin de visa a été attendue à la sortie du collège par la police, qui renvoyait à la frontière toute la famille. Mais on ne sépare pas les enfants des familles non plus en France. Je croyais qu'on ne le faisait pas dans les démocraties. Donc, il y a eu un immense scandale avec une prise de position générale en faveur, justement, de l'enfant. C'est-à-dire, et c'est une idée très républicaine, c'est-à-dire que l'enfant est élevé par l'État, autant que par des parents, si ce n'est plus. C'est pour ça que l'école est obligatoire, l'école maternelle est obligatoire, etc. Oui, Tatiana.
Juste pour compléter, peut-être en ce moment, nous sommes en période électorale et le Front, enfin, c'est plus le Front National, c'est le Rassemblement National, focalise sur le sujet des mineurs isolés, des mineurs étrangers. Et alors, ça prend une place dans leur programme qui est absolument phénoménale. Ça coûte de l'argent à l'État. Enfin, c'est absolument abject, cette focalisation sur les mineurs isolés, les migrants, voilà, les mineurs migrants. En ce moment, dans la campagne des départementales dans quelques semaines, qui annonce la campagne présidentielle dans un an qui a commencé là. Donc voilà, le Rassemblement national focalise sur ce sujet-là précisément.
Ils ne sont pas encore élus. Hein. Non, oui, je sais. Et il y a un très très beau film que j'ai vu, dont j'arrive pas à retrouver le titre, mais qui est paru il y a 3-4 ans sur justement un de ces enfants qui est le héros d'une promenade dans Paris, dans la banlieue. Donc c'est assez différent comme tonalité quand même. Hein. Et je crois qu'il y a une présence de ces enfants dans l'imaginaire français.
Oui,
Moi,
si,
j'ai
si
une
tu me
question
permets
pour
de me
David. Pardon. Moi, j'ai une question pour David avant qu'on se sépare, parce que je trouve que enfin, peut-être qu'on aurait dû organiser différemment. D'abord, je voudrais te remercier, David. Est-ce que tu entends l'interprétation, David? Oui, ok. Je voulais te remercier de cette présentation. Je voulais insister sur le fait que lorsque David a fait ses recherches sur le logo, d'abord, la première chose qui nous a frappé, c'était que représenter une femme, les jambes écartées, les bras ouverts, moi j'avais l'impression de voir une femme qui gisait au sol après avoir été attaquée. Alors que représenter un homme, les bras et les jambes ouverts, c'était le triomphe de l'homme debout. Et c'est comme ça qu'on a commencé. Et David a trouvé la solution du mouvement, la solution de faire éclater les cadres, mais surtout, il a trouvé le corps de la femme enceinte. Et c'est pour ça que je voulais le remettre dans la conversation. Ce corps qui change sans arrêt et qu'on ne peut pas définir par une proportion qui serait idéale, puisque la déformation du corps féminin qui est visible, il définit justement la vérité de ce corps. Et c'était passionnant parce que son modèle, enfin la femme modèle, était enceinte pour le cours de dessin anatomique. Et donc, ça nous a semblé intéressant de voir aussi la réaction des étudiants à ce corps qui changeait à chaque séance. Et pour moi, c'était l'occasion de confronter cette variation à la réaction des médecins. Parce que les médecins au XVIe siècle disent le problème, c'est que le corps change, on ne voit rien à l'utérus quand la femme n'est pas enceinte, donc par convention, nous allons représenter l'utérus vide, mais de la taille d'un utérus de femme enceinte. Et ça, j'ai trouvé ça passionnant parce que c'est quand même la représentation qui nous a été léguée. C'est celle de cet immense utérus, enfin, prêt à recevoir un fœtus, et non pas celle du petit noyau d'abricot, que serait l'utérus sans la grossesse. Alors, qu'est-ce que tu en penses, David, de ça? En regardant les images de Marina et les autres.
I'm sorry, Hélène, I did not have my interpretation on. Could you?
Shoot.
I'm sorry, I didn't know.
That was, sorry.
No,
so
my fault.
question was, I was praising the fact that you had a pregnant model and that you were going through the variations and the differences in proportions of the female body. And I was struck by the fact that the political images of Marina showed a stable body when they showed the uterus, and nearly a caricatural pregnancy, you know, like a ball that would be outside of this body. And I was wondering if it's only a matter of visual conventions, or, and I wanted to ask the visual artist about that. Do I make sense, David?
Well, like the idea that the representations of the body that is static compared to that is moving?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. It's part of our visual processing has to do with movement, but the image is confined. I don't really have an answer to your question, but we are used to images being static. However, even if we look at ancient art, there are representations of movement. It is interesting how we understand images in relation to language, and that movement can be part of it. I'm sorry, I don't really have an answer, but it is
But there are no answers, but you gave us something to meditate. What do you think, Marina, about that?
About the way the representation, I think that, you know, we are talking about, as you said, the caricatures, like these images do not want to be verosimile, like, you know, they don't want to bear verisimilitude. They want to be, some of them are more cartoonish, some of them are more grotesque. There is a tradition in graphic narratives that arch back to the underground comics that want to emphasize ugliness, right? This in order to also disrupt a certain aesthetic sense and make an impact. So I think that what also a lot of the images that I showed are images that were produced very fast, right? As a response to a call, they produce something really, really fast. And so I think that issues of proportions, of verisimilitude were not exactly playing out in their mind. But you see sometimes just sketches of an image, or the use of the colors is also significant, because purple in Spanish is a reminder of the Second Republic, which was, you know, left wing. The flag of the Second Republic had purple, red, and yellow. Then the Spanish flag only has red and yellow. So bringing purple is not just the feminist color, but it's also this Republican color. So I think they really want to emphasize certain messages, but in terms of verisimilitude, I don't think it was.
No, I wasn't talking about verisimilitude. I was talking about where does this uterus image comes from, which is a very fixed and normative representation, and the research of David to bring variation and non-normative representation. And I also think of Bretécher, who is always showing future mothers looking at themselves with surprise, and, you know, saying, or looking at their breast and saying, "Gosh, am I changing? Is that me? Will it last?" And this dimension of ownership of mothers, I didn't think it was visually represented in these cartoons, and that was a remark. That's all.
Yes, you know, it's interesting because yeah, Beta Share has these women who are always surprised of, but perhaps that's a commentary on the fact that we are so estranged from our bodies, right?
Are we? Are we? Or
Well,
do we think that a body should remain the same? Because if we are estranged from our bodies, then age is also a question. Gender is also a question. And maybe, I mean, I'm thinking of feminist artists like Caroline, who has left, who is embracing this multiplicity of my body and makes it at the center of her research. So sorry that I know I'm going to another topic, and I wanted also to bring David back in the discussion.
That's very nice. Just on that idea of the sketch of drawing, life drawing, I mean, that is an aspect that the figure is moving and alive, and we put it in a stationary, fixed illusion of time. So it is a strange thing, but the gesture, drawing fast, this is when we get the essence of life, as opposed to a drawing of a bird on a branch. Never looks like that. It would be more of a blur of feathers. So that's the interesting aspect of life drawing, capture gesture, drawing fast, to capture the essence of life.
That's so wonderful to have art. Thank you.
Is there any other question, comments?
Peut-être juste un mot, parce que ça rebondit sur ce que vient de dire Hélène, sur ce corps féminin qui a du mal à s'inscrire dans la perfection des formes du carré et du rond de Vitruve. Hein. C'est sûr que le corps humain, le corps féminin bougeant tout le temps, on a du mal à le faire entrer dans la géométrie. Ça me faisait penser à cette origine du monde dont la parodie avait été faite par Orlan sous le nom d'Origine de la guerre. Je ne sais pas si vous voyez le tableau, c'est le même tableau avec un sexe masculin, le même tableau courbé avec un sexe masculin. C'est l'idée que dès qu'on veut chercher à inverser, si on veut faire la femme de Vitruve avec l'homme de Vitruve, c'est comme si on veut faire l'origine du monde au masculin, ça donne quelque chose de monstrueux. On est mis en crise, enfin le modèle est mis en crise. Je ne sais pas si ça vous parle.
Oui, oui, merci.
Donc, merci alors à toutes et à tous, et on se revoit mercredi.